everyone to this very interesting debate. How is Indian Realty going to get affected with elections? Pre-elections, what's happened, and post-elections, what are the expectations? Well, the Indian stock markets have decided to celebrate the elections and the electoral victory even before a single vote has been cast. The Nifty has been making new highs all of last week and this week. The euphoria is palpable and sometimes a bit scary, isn't it? But that's the nature of the stock market beast. It races ahead of all good news and discounts all the negative way ahead of its time. Both ways, sentiments run amok. What about real estate? What happens to this sector before and after elections? Does money leave the sector pre-elections? And will it move back post-elections? Will sales pick up? And which markets across India will do well? We'll slug all of that out on today's show. My panelists are Niranjan Hiranandani, co-founder and chairman of Hiranandani Group. Good to have you with us, sir. Sunil Mantri, CMD Mantri Realty Limited and President Narrateco. Mr. Mantri, thank you very much for joining in. David Walker, Executive Director, Sare Homes. Mr. Walker, thank you very much. Nishant Singhal, Promoter and Director, Strategy Investors Clinic. And of course, he's got a lot of data for us today and also consumer sentiment. Sameer Jasuja, Founder and CEO of Prop Equity. There's also Mr. C. Prabhakar, Director, Gopalan Enterprises, joining us from Bangalore. Mr. Prabhakar, thank you very much for making the time. And Kunal Banerjee, CMO, M3M India, joining in to also tell us what the buyers are looking for pre- and post-elections. Okay, so a lot of excitement, but let me just tell you what's happened in 2013. This is a year ahead of elections. It wasn't a pretty picture at all. New residential launches dropped in top 8 cities of India. According to Cushman & Wakefield, the number was 12%. And residential markets, actually new launches dropping is a big thing, because remember this, we keep talking about the pent-up demand for housing in this country. Even then the developers didn't have the courage to launch more projects. Developers, of course, also struggled to control debt, were battling strained cash flows, increased input costs and low sales. Everybody is hoping that demand has to revive post-elections. Net office absorption, and if you look at the office space, commercial space, has probably done worse than the residential space. That declined by 25% across top 8 cities in 2013, and new supply dropped 14% last year, that's 2013, to 34 million square feet. That's again data from Cushman & Wakefield report. Okay, so the first question goes to Mr. Hiranandani. Mr. Hiranandani, it's been a very, disappointing year as a run-up to elections. People say that's also because a lot of money gets drawn out of real estate before elections. Do you really believe that's true?
Extremely true. A large number of people across the country, political and otherwise, have invested money into real estate and want to pull out before the elections, and it's across the board, across the country. So a lot of it does happen pre the election. So naturally, the kind of fund flows available in the real estate field will definitely get impinged. But this is not new. It happens every time before election. So I see it across the board. And usually this kind of position changes immediately after the elections, or maybe about 2 to 3 months after the election. So that's what you're going to see this election too, I presume.
Okay. Mr. Mantri, every developer I speak to says that sluggish demand will pick up once general elections in the country get over. So it's all about sentiments. Tell me, can sentiments alone in this case, the industry is battling so many issues, drive up the market?
Yeah, Manisha, I agree with that. Basically, there is a little difference compared to if you see the stock market versus real estate. Stock market runs always 6 months or 3 months in advance. They predict what is going to happen. Like for example, if good monsoon is going to happen, in the April month itself, the index will shoot up. The real estate is slightly different. We look at stable government. We look for a higher GDP growth. We look little reforms, and based on these assumptions, real estate can move well. As you know, a lot of policies are pending. For example, relaxation in FDI, foreign direct investment. There were more concessions going to come in environment clearances, that is pending. The rate which can attract 5 to 10 billion investment, that is pending from the government side for its final decision. So I think I am expecting a lot of the reforms to come around the corner after maybe 2-3 month time. There would be higher GDP growth, there will be right decision taken, there will be relaxation in foreign direct investment, and on these hopes or these assumptions, I feel a good future is there for the real estate maybe 2-3 months down the line. I think whatever worst was there, probably
we have a long hour to go. So you're saying stable government. Now let's look at what this stable government is. We had 9.5 years of stable government, Mr. Gopalan. Mr. Prabhakar, tell me, wasn't that good enough for real estate sector to have done well? So are we saying stable government but a change in government as well?
No, a stable government with no reforms is of no use. No. Today, when we see the market is very dynamic, and the government also has to change with the times, to see a lot more new reforms are brought in. And because we are not competing within the country, we are competing with international countries and the norms. So there's a lot of external factors also involved in real estate. So we expect a government to be very proactive to the industry's needs and to see that a lot more new reforms have been brought in. That is very important to see that to sustain development.
Okay, so
and also to see that the government is pro-development. The present government has not been very successful in bringing out new policies and framing clarity in the existing real estate norms. They have not even recognized the real estate as an infrastructure status. That itself is a big concern.
Okay, so that's been the demand for the longest time, that the real estate sector gets an infrastructure status. Well, affordable housing also doesn't have an industry status, which would have got it tax breaks. But David Walker, what's your opinion? So there is a stable government, but we've had stable government. It hasn't worked for the sector well at all. Now we are talking about stable and a government which will bring in reforms. Are we pinning? Is everybody pinning too many hopes from this election? How do you see it as an insider, but with an outside perspective as well?
I think my view, and certainly from a real estate perspective, is that there has been quite a significant slowdown in the market over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think...
Is it worrying? Is it scary, the distress? You can see a lot of distress?
I don't think it's a lot of distress. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of distress in the secondary market, which tends to fluctuate a bit more in price terms rather than the primary market. I think from a primary market perspective, developers, other than at the really high end, are limited in their capability to reduce prices. So it's more a question of volumes falling off rather than prices falling away. I think in terms of what we all look forward to, and I think probably the country is looking forward to, is it needs an uplift in confidence. And I think there's been a feeling that things are not going right in India in the last couple of years. Growth has slowed down significantly for any number of reasons. So I think in terms of people looking forward, I think a stable government is one thing that's important, but I think a decisive government as well. And a government that can bring optimism back to the country. And I think, like the stock market can move very quickly, I think the real estate business can come back very quickly as well.
Okay, Nishant, do you support that the real estate market can come back really quickly? You say that it can, depending on what happens on May 17th.
Yeah, it can, because I think if there is a change in government and people get what people want, which is, I don't want to take names, I think... So there's a change in government. Clearly the wind is blowing if you have the same government. So now let's start decoding. If you get the same government, supported, etc., but because every opinion poll is ruling off UPA now, or at least Congress showing a poor performance. But if they do have, let's say, an alliance with the third front, you think the markets, the stock markets and the real estate markets will tank? Yeah, for short term. I think another 9 months or so. There will be, the slowdown will continue. Okay. However, we are seeing revival in the... So what will bring that sentiment revival? Say it, Nishant. You don't have any political agenda and you don't have to please anybody. So if we You're for the consumer. So if we, at 11:30, 17th May, if we see ticker with respect to NDA at somewhere closer or above 200, I think it will be a big sentiment boost. The biggest sentiment changer would be that people who are waiting to buy on the will come out and start buying. It's not that people are not sitting on money, they are sitting on cash, they want to buy, but they just want to see which way the wind is blowing, whether the market, pessimists are thinking that it will come down by 5%, optimists are thinking that even if it goes by 5%, they will still feel comfortable to buy. Secondly, in terms of resale, I think if just 10,000 resale transactions happen in Gurgaon of 1 crore each, where people have paid 30 to 40% money, it will bring huge amounts into circulation back into the sector. For example, in Gurgaon, similarly Noida, similarly Bangalore. So I think the change in guard will bring faster pace to resale.
Okay.
And B, people who want to buy in primary and who are waiting will also come out to buy.
All right. Dr. Kunal Banerjee, interesting point, and of course the market that you are present in is being discussed, which is Gurgaon. So Nishant here tells me that if on May 17th by 11:30 the ticker shows 200 plus for NDA, you're going to get investors and buyers all back into the market. Are you that optimistic? Is it going to be that quick a sentiment turnaround?
I'm very happy with what Nishant has said, and I agree with him to a large extent. But I'd like to qualify that. You know, it's about the macro issues. It's not just about change of guard. It's not just about, you know, who comes into power. After all, even the present government had a lot of progressive policies in their mind, and they had put forward a lot of progressive policies as far as vis-a-vis real estate is concerned. It's a question of going through with them and looking at the macro issues in real estate. And Mr. Hirandani had also said that there are certain, you know, points which the government, whichever government comes into power, will have to look at, which is on the development of the real estate, sector.
Okay.
You know, the progressive sentiments that we want in real estate can only come through with these instruments which are going to help the real estate business, you know, go further and progress. Okay. That will change the sentiments. Right now, people are waiting and watching, and this has been going on for the last 3 to 6 months, in fact, as to what will happen next. Those who wanted the primary, to get into the primary market and buy, new projects, whether it's Gurgaon, Noida, or, Faridabad, or any areas of Delhi, NCR, or Bangalore, were waiting and watching to see how this market is going to move in future. Will there be progressive policies which will make this more fluid? Will cost of money come down? Will real estate people now start, developers have the wherewithal to start building again at a great speed?
Okay.
Will the money be there? Will there be instruments like REIT? Okay. Will there be, FDI is being made easier so that, people can come into this market?
All right, Dr. Banerjee, hold your thought.
Rightly,
okay, you pointed out a couple of things that we are going to discuss, but that's a lot for a retail buyer to consider, whether FDI will come in, whether, so I understand that the sector as a whole will only revive thoroughly if the macro factors also fall into place. But sluggish demand is something that they need to get over with in a hurry, and that's all that we are waiting for the election results to do, isn't it, Sameer?
See, first of all, I have a slightly contrarian view here.
All right.
I think everybody has been blaming the economy, blaming the government, and so on and so forth. I think we have to look inside. I think we've had the best 5 years or the best last 7 years except the last 12 to 18 months for real estate.
Absolutely.
If you look at the kind of new launches, the government was the same, right? The new launches were unprecedented, the price rises were unprecedented, the kind of land that came into the markets was unreal, whether you look at Gurgaon or Bangalore or you look at Navi Mumbai, etc. But what has really happened? The prices have run away, and that's why the demand is now tapering off, which nobody will accept, right?
So prices have become unaffordable.
They have become unaffordable. The market is quite shallow at the top level, and most of the developers are operating at that top price point where we don't have that kind of demand. The second big point is, why is the government to be blamed for this lack of execution? Why is the government to be blamed for the developers launching 30,000 units, I'm talking about a single developer, and then running out of cash? Why would I blame the government or the economy for that? I think real estate is much more stable than the stock markets, first of all, and so my view is, irrespective of whichever government comes in on May 17th, the markets are not going to move for the next 1 year unless the developers want it to move. It's all in the hands of the developers for them to be able to come back to launching projects at affordable price points. We are talking about slowdown in Gurgaon, but I hear of projects being launched on Sona Road in the new master plan and being sold overnight even today. Why is that so? Because the price point is affordable enough for a person to come in and buy.
All right, so we're going to come back in a moment with that big thought Has the industry outpriced itself? Are the buyers just going to come back because of the sentiment turnaround with a change in the government and the hope that the new government will bring in reforms? Or does the industry itself need to do some amount of introspection and figure out at what price should the new launches be? You're watching pre and post elections. How does the real estate market play out for you as a buyer? Welcome back. Real estate pre and post elections, that's what we are discussing. If you've been sitting on the fence, is May 17th and the verdict of May 17th going to decide which way you will move, or will the market continue to offer you opportunities to buy? It has been sluggish. It has been a buyer's market for the last 15 to 18 months. What will happen? Or will it actually run up so much that you may miss the boat and feel terrible about not having taken this opportunity and actually making the most of it? That's what we are discussing today and trying to get to understand some of the points. Let's just take a quick look before I go back to my panelists. What were the 10 markets that had the potential but really lost steam due to various reasons? Now, North India, Faridabad, especially Greater Faridabad, was one market which actually didn't do well at all. New launches completely stopped in this market. Then there was Greater Noida, Noida Extension with its own set of problems, oversupply, and of course in Noida Extension you did have the farmer agitation and court cases going on, which again took it down, but it was a sluggish market. Pari Chowk, Jaipur and Ajmer Road, these markets didn't do well. Mohali, Zirakpur, Sonipat, Kundli. Let's move to Mumbai. What were the markets which have actually been the most sluggish? Navi Mumbai, Panvel, Thane, Virar, West and East are the markets. Hyderabad, well, most of Hyderabad actually bucked the trend. It was a dull market, it was a dark horse, it did extremely well in the last 12 to 18 months simply because it was very well priced. But there was one market which didn't do well, that's Nagole. Then there's Uppal stretch, Bangalore, Mysore highway which didn't do very well, and in Chennai, Kilambakam. Now we are only highlighting because some of you may have bought properties in this market. Now what we need to understand from our panelists is what goes on from here. Post-elections, will these markets come back? Mr. Hiranandani, I think Samir has literally opened the Pandora's box and says, why are we blaming the government? What about developers looking at themselves? Have they outpriced the market for the buyer, and none of that is going to change with the elections?
There are two aspects really that, Manisha, we need to look at. One is the question of land cost. I think we are not looking at the land cost which is going up, and with the land acquisition bills, which modification is there, land cost and all the ready reckoner rates or whatever other jantri rates as you call in Ahmedabad, or whatever is the other rates that you are showing in the rest of the country, all of them have increased by a compound of 15 to 25% per year for the last 3 years. So replacement cost of land, if you go back to sell your apartments, is going up, and it's certainly not going down. So you're going to see that inflation cost, which is separate from the construction and delivery of the real estate developer, and I think it's a big question mark as to what is going to be done. Lots of cities are of course compensating that by increasing the FAR or FSI depending on where you are, or giving some other benefits which will be there. But that has to be tagged on with the volume of material available in the market as well as the infrastructure which is being developed. So areas of good infrastructure or excellent infrastructure, like you have a monorail coming in, or you have some underground which is announced, or a expressway which is coming in, or some other development which takes place, you're going. So what you're going to see in the next 12 months is different than what you saw in the last 18 months. You're going to see improvement, definitely. How much improvement will depend on the locations. So in certain areas, good government or very good government, depending on how you analyze the effect on the real estate market, is going to see great improvement, good improvement, ordinary improvement. But my prediction is you're definitely going to see an improvement, mainly because a large number of people are now sitting on the fence. They are not sure. Real estate is a long-term investment. Stock market is a short-term investment. So you cannot get into a real estate investment for the short term. It never happens. So you are going to see the decision on this happening post-elections, irrespective of what else you may have to see. But the major difference, Manisha, is going to be that certain areas are going to grow very much faster. Other areas will still continue to be slow when there is an oversupply compared to the markets. So differentially, looking at it differently, can I repeat this? Some areas will grow fantastically, some will not.
Okay.
But
what happens,
I believe
Mr.
that
Hiranandani?
most of the areas will
What
definitely
happens
see an
if you
improvement.
if you don't get a stable government? What then? What happens to the buyers who are sitting on the fence? Do you think that they will continue to sit on the fence?
Then you may not get a fantastic increase. You may not get a fantastic increase, but you will definitely still get an increase in business because a lot of the fence sitters will now come into the market. It's only a question of what price which will be there. So the question will be what will be the pricing of the goods rather than actually the extent of development.
Okay, so pricing of the good. We are back to that. That's the crucial point, I think, Nishant, that Mr. Hiranandani said. If you don't get a stable government, it's going to be rocky. In fact, there's going to be more worry. The sentiments are going to turn more negative, isn't it? Even the markets are going to tank. Stock markets will tank. Now, real estate, irrespective of what we say, unstable government is a scary situation. And then what happens? Will the sector be able to sustain that prolonged slowdown?
No, it won't be, because like Sameer just mentioned, that we saw last 6 years of very good growth in real estate because GDP was growing at 8%, services sector, manufacturing sector, core industry, everything was creating jobs, and that's why people were buying, because that's the first thing people do in India. As soon as they get into a 5 lakh, 6 lakh per annum job, they invest their money into real estate, even if they are staying in an ancestral house, because that's the easiest investment to do. So I feel that unless there is a stable government, the biggest impact will be on job creation. Services is negative, your core sector is negative, coal sector, power sector, cement, steel, everything is seeing negative growth. So unless a stable government comes and which can be decisive, unlike what indecisiveness what we have seen in last 3 to 4 years, unless there is a decisive prime minister sitting on the chair, it will directly impact job creation, which will directly impact real estate.
And sentiments clearly aren't going to turn positive, even mildly, if you do have a hung parliament. David, have you actually, envisaged a situation like that? I'm sure everyone looks at the strategies and says, what do we do if this, this is a reality?
Yeah, I think it's not a scenario that anybody is keen to contemplate. Everybody is hoping for a decisive victory for one party. In terms of the real estate segment, I think there is a pent-up demand that is required, and I think it's more than the current rate that it's run at. And I think it is all about confidence, because there's a limit to where pricing can go.
Why is that? Why is that?
Cost of land is there, cost of manufacturing, cost of construction. There's a limit to how low they can go, and over the longer term, inflation is still relatively high in this environment. Pricing of housing has to move up. So real estate is one of the greatest hedges against inflation, and sure, taking on debt is also another great way to protect yourself against inflation. So I think, if you take a 5-year view, there is no way in the world that you can imagine that prices will not be considerably higher than where they are today.
Sameer, how do you react to that?
Well, I'd like to ask him one question. They launched a project in New Gurgaon at 1800 rupees a square foot maybe 4 years ago. Today they're selling at 7,000 rupees a square foot or 6,000 rupees a square foot. Inflation hasn't gone up that much higher. The land cost was the same. So I think that the fact of the matter is, yes, I am not disputing that land cost is going to get any cheaper. But the kind of land parcels that have got released under the new master plan, and the cost of acquisition of those land parcels has been phenomenally low. And I know that for a fact. For example, if you look at Delhi, land has been bought here at 1/3 the rates of Noida and Gurgaon, and we're talking about main Delhi over here, and 700 kilometers of land. Now, if a developer chooses to launch over there at 8,000 rupees a square foot, where his cost of FSI is 200 rupees a square foot, and his cost of construction is 2,500, and he says, no, land is getting cheaper, I refuse to buy that argument. It is that maybe there is a huge cost of risk to do this business, and there are a lot of risks in this area, but I definitely do think that with infrastructure improving, with, for example, metro reaching far-flung areas, where areas infrastructure getting improved, more development coming in that area, you have enough and more land over here, and that's being demonstrated across the board. There is land and prices are still coming down.
Okay, 5 years though?
Well, I think
3 years.
My personal opinion is that in tier 1 cities especially, more markets have now reached the price point which has become less affordable.
Less affordable, and they're getting saturated. Sunil Mantri is smiling there. Okay, Mr. Mantri, come in here. There is a debate and we are divided. We're saying that, you know, there is room for developers to bring down prices. I mean, at least the NCR market and some of the markets in Mumbai as well. You know, even if you look at Thane today, slowed down so much, but look at the way the launches have been. 3 years ago, they were so much more reasonable. Now prices have gone up by 3 times. Dwarka Expressway in Delhi or NCR, there was a project launched at 4,000, and now there's a project last 6 months ago which was launched at 9,000, 11,000. So, you know, sometimes we as the consumer and as media just cannot understand what changes. These land banks have been lying with the developer for the longest time. How do you justify prices going up by 2 times or 3 times in 1.5 years? And these are new launches, and believe me, it's new launches which are happening at higher prices, which also then, you know, creates this entire inflation in pricing.
I completely agree, Manisha. The first and basic reason is that why the demand is low. I think you have asked a question. There is not so much offtake, and the price is the biggest barometer for all this. Because remember, the real estate is worked out based on the affordability. Someone has a budget of 1 crore, someone has a 5 crore, and some may have a 10 crore. Based on that, they go for selection of the product and selection of the square feet area. Now, it's a big concern that prices are escalating too much, and that is impacting not many inquiries are converting into buyers. So that is the biggest challenge, and it is too much appreciation is happening. I believe I will appreciate if the real estate is appreciating at 12%, 15% per annum speed. The speed currently is 30 to 40%, and that's why you see in 2 year, 3 year, the prices are getting double, which is not good. I think for a steady business growth, we need about 15% appreciation, 12 to 15% appreciation, and if for any reason, if the huge land parcels are created, I am confident that the prices in those particular area will be coming down, because people will work it out various options, say for example affordable housing, 1-bedroom house or studio apartment and so on, and many options will be created. That's point one. Second, in last few months, not the GDP growth has been impacted, not too many jobs created, not too many reforms in terms of foreign direct investment, retail and other things have been created, and that has also impacting the whole sector very adversely. And I hope that once a new government come in power, doesn't matter whether existing come back in power or the new government come back in power, they are going to take large number of the decision which are going to kickstart the whole economy, the GDP growth, job employment, which is the biggest challenge and currently failure of the present government for the last 2 years, because we have seen GDP growth is below 5%, which is not good for our industry, and if this growth one can escalate to the 7-8% region, I think it's a huge opportunity for the developer. And some areas where more supply is coming, the prices may correct, but some areas where you don't have much supply, I think prices may remain firm. It can escalate further also.
I'm not really sure. Even in areas of South Delhi, at least this is the market that we stay in, Vasant Vihar, Defence Colony have all dropped 40%. So to say that areas which is not getting new supply, I think if there's a lot of froth built into a product, if it's gone beyond rationality, prices will drop. I mean, Dwarka Expressway is a standing story today on how now there is no resale happening at anything above 5,500-6,000 rupees per square foot. Kunal Banerjee, what is your own view in terms of how the markets are priced today in NCR? I mean, have they, at least in Gurgaon and Dwarka Expressway, have they really run up too fast? And that's probably an example of why the buyers have disappeared.
Well, Manisha, I don't think you can make a sweeping statement like that. We can have a macro view of different developers and different projects, but to have a clean sweep and say that prices have escalated without reason, perhaps is not the right way to look at it. if you look at a product, any product, whether it's pre-election or post-election, if the valuation is based on what you're offering the customer and studied on what that customer wants, what that customer needs, what they have seen in Singapore and Los Angeles and Dubai, and they say we want it right here in Gurgaon, in Golf Course Extension Road or Golf Course Road or somewhere in other areas of Noida or Greater Noida, and that's what they want. And then the developer will have to provide that product, or may choose to provide that product with the ingredients and with the construction, with the finishing to the level which costs more. So it's not a question of, just saying that we will raise the price because there's a euphoria in town and, the wind is to raise the price, so let's do that. That is illogical. And I don't think a mature developer would do that.
Okay, all right.
In spite of the elections, as the topic is on today, I think that the market is there, and especially for, areas which are good pockets, I see appreciation coming here. In spite of, good or bad government, and I think the government has not been that bad. It's a question of how we react to it and how we react to the market.
All right, let me get in Mr. Prabhakar here. I mean, I haven't yet, actually across India, most of the hot markets, Mr. Prabhakar, have all cooled down. The sales have slowed down. I haven't seen any price appreciation in the last 3-6 months. It might be on paper, but there are no takers for that price increase. I might be wrong. Dr. Banerjee, of course, has more experience with sales, but buyers aren't buying anything more expensive, and Bangalore, which is one of the sanest markets in India, which hasn't had runaway price movement, has also slowed down. What does it say?
No, Bangalore has been primarily relying on captive customers. People who are genuine buyers, less of investors investing in the projects. And what we have seen now in last few years, last year as such, there has been a large oversupply of apartments, apartments and other projects coming in, with builders' appetite to much larger projects. But what we see now primarily is with this wait and watch situation by these customers, people are buying nearly completed projects, ready to move in projects, which is a good thing, which is a lot of existing inventories are being sold. I think this will make a new wave for new launches now after the election. I think that will, this present trend, this present few months of lull will absorb the present
You're saying
the apartments which are not being sold.
All right, so you're saying maybe it's a good thing that at least the existing inventory is getting sold, and the market itself has created a situation that that exuberance of oversupply is now waning out. Nishant, that's a good thing. I think sometimes in industry slowdown actually is a time for sanity, isn't it?
And I don't agree that prices have not corrected. Prices have actually corrected.
Of
so
course
if you see, compare pricing today with pricing 6 months back, if you factor in the monetary value of all the festival discounts, timely payment rebates, subvention schemes, deferred payment plans, free car park, free club, etc., etc.
Oh, 15% knocked down on every project.
Yeah, 15 to 20%. So prices have corrected. And based on this price correction, people who are smart buyers have picked up inventory. Obviously, this pace is not sufficient to sustain the current state of real estate industry, because all the developers on all India basis prepared themselves for 8% GDP growth. And suddenly we have seen this bump where the GDP has come down to 4.8. The question is that if GDP goes back to 8%, whether real estate can again sustain the same volumes which is sustained over the last 5 years. I think the answer is yes. If the GDP goes back to 8%, if there is enough job creation, we can come back to the level of sales which we saw probably 2.5 years back. It would be wrong to say that just because in 10 years we have seen sales of say 1 million inventory, we can't see that 1 million inventory sales again. The answer is that if we go back to the growth path, and it's not that we start getting 8% GDP growth today.
We won't. That's what I was going to ask you. It will take a while.
Yeah, if people can foresee. If there is a path, if there is a direction, and people can see that it is going there, even by 2017, people will start buying.
So, real estate sector should claw back if you do have a stable government which is going to take definitive decisions. I think that's the verdict which is emerging here. But will prices start running away? It's anybody's guess. We'll come back and ask everybody on what is one thing at the top of their agenda from the new government and what are they hoping for in terms of change. The verdict today has been that if we get a stable government and a change in government, we are likely to see the real estate sector bouncing back. Well, on that note, I'm going to ask all my panelists for one thing that they would like to see from the new government. Niranjan Hiranandani, I know that the sector has a long list of what they want, but I just want that one thing which should be the priority for the new government.
I think a large amount of projects are stuck because of decision making and decision making at various levels. I would say environmental clearance is still taking a back seat. I think approvals in terms of corporation and other matters is also very slow. At the government level also, decision making in giving approvals for real estate projects is absolutely very slow. I think what we would look forward to is quick decision making and increase of infrastructure projects which are correlated ultimately to township projects.
Okay, fair enough. Sunil Mantri, top on your wish list. Only one.
One single line, the new government should aim to achieve 8% GDP growth and do everything what is required to achieve 8%, whether it's a policy reforms, whether clearance reform, whether banking reforms, whether FDI reforms and environment clearances, every issue. I want 8% GDP growth should be the aim or the topmost agenda of the new government, and if that is done, we achieve everything.
Okay, so you're going to be back on track with that. Mr. Kunal Banerjee?
A very positive note, a buyer-friendly fiscal policy. A buyer-friendly fiscal policy, which happened the last time, it really made the market surge. It will change the sentiment around, it will be a good sentiment around, and I think all developers will be happy with that.
Okay. Let me go across to Bangalore. Mr. Prabhakar, top on your wish list.
Yeah. See, we need a decisive government, which can take active decision to breed existing and new businesses, which will gain the confidence of new investors.
All right. So somehow I'm getting the sense that it's all about decisiveness. You need decisiveness. You need someone to get back into action very quickly, and of course make sure or show us the light and the path to that 8% growth. David Walker, am I right in summing up that way?
Yes, you are. I think I mentioned confidence before, and I've mentioned decisiveness before, but I think also India should think about 10% growth. Why 8%? Why is that the speed limit?
All right.
But let's raise the pace. And I think another thing
right
is
now
that
you're struggling to even hit the 5% mark. 8% sounds so good.
This is why you need to have some confidence and believe in what can be done.
Samir, you have the confidence? Last word, always to Samir Jasuja.
Well, in my view, what I've noticed is that employment generation has been the biggest cause for real estate appreciation.
Yes.
So if they can create the maximum number of white-collar jobs, irrespective of infrastructure, you'll see real estate do very well.
So not just jobs, but white-collar jobs. Well, we need manufacturing to come back as well, Nishant.
I agree, completely agree with Samir, because project clearances, environmental clearances, fiscal policy, etc., will take a lot of time to correct. If the new government can chalk out a 180-day plan and let the country know how they are going to create 10 million new jobs, I think then we are done.
All right, so 180-day plan, how will they create 10 million jobs, show us the path to 8% growth, and of course a clear verdict. I think everything is resting on the fact that we don't have a hung parliament, we have a clear verdict, and we will have some amount of buoyancy coming back in the real estate sector, which is much needed. Niranjan Hiranandani, Sunil Mantri, we also have David Walker, thank you, Nishant Singhal, thanks very much, Samir Jasuja, Mr. Prabhakar and Kunal Banerjee. Gentlemen, pleasure having you all with me here today, and we are just keeping our fingers crossed that all of it does pan out as we are hoping for, because this country and all of us really need stability and decisiveness in governance. Thanks very much for joining me today.